So first off, I want to really thank Daniela Soleri for joining us. She has been an amazing advocate for um, seeds and community resilience. She is a research scientist at UC, the University of California, Santa Barbara, and she is also the co-author of um, Food Gardens for a Changing World. And I hope you talk a little bit about the project you're doing in California with some of the seed libraries. Are you planning on doing that? Yeah, so she'll talk a little bit about this
Yeah.
exciting project about climate adaptation that she's working on and organizing with seed librarians in the state of California. So we are excited to hear what you have to share with us.
Yeah, thank you so much. And before I start the slides, a note to you, Rebecca, I can't record unless I get your permission.
Oh, I do not know how to do that. Let's see.
Yeah, so maybe we could just go with your recording.
Okay, let's hope so. Let's hope.
Do we do that?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Rebecca, for organizing this and so many, many other things. You're an incredible force in the seed movement for sure. And so welcome everyone. I'm going to share my screen so that we can start the presentation, and I'll explain. Okay, just a second. It's coming. Okay, great. Huh. So I'm gonna move you all off to the side a little bit from me. Okay. Um, Also, just one last thing, hide video. Okay. So my talk today is titled Food Gardens and Seeds, Responding to a Changing World. And it draws on the recent book that Rebecca mentioned, which is called Food Gardens for a Changing World. And that book is about how we as gardeners and communities and researchers can work together and figure out how to be able to reap the benefits of food gardens under these changing conditions that represent changes that we haven't experienced before. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that today. Um, so the book covers a lot of areas, but there is, as I said, this real emphasis on communities initiating and asking their own questions and working often with scientists to sort those questions out, to answer those questions and develop strategies that work for them. So I just want to draw your attention to the cover photo. Um, I don't know if anyone can figure out what the cover photo is. It's a garden, a community garden in Brooklyn, but it's there because I really, really liked the fact that this is a photo created by the community garden itself. And if you look on the far left side, that sort of triangle that sticks out toward the spine of the book, you'll see a person standing on the sidewalk. So what happened was they got a really, really long fishing pole and put a camera on the end of it that was in automatic advanced mode. And they walked around their garden and they documented their garden themselves. So, and this was part of their research about their own garden, learning about their garden, being able to see the larger landscape of their garden. And it really represents the kind of approach that we encourage in the book itself. So I enjoy that photo. If you examine it, you can find people there and different little quadrants of photographs that they stitched together for that view of their garden. Just a quick little bit more about me. I have been looking at gardens for a long time. I did my master's research looking at household gardens in low income neighborhoods in Tucson. I was a market gardener for about 3 years. I co ran the Native Seed Search demonstration garden for over 4 years, and wrote an earlier book, co authored an earlier book, Food Gardens, Food from Dryland Gardens, which was similar to this one, but mostly focused on the global south, and focused also on um, development projects, people working with communities to improve their food gardening outcomes, and often drawing heavily on locally developed methods and strategies from those areas. So let me move ahead just to give you a quick orientation. Today I'm going to talk about briefly the benefits that gardens can offer. We're usually aware of a lot of these, but it's good to recall them as we set out into our work and work together to support those benefits. I'll go over two of the trends that are impacting our gardens, and a way that we can think about these trends in the context of our gardens and how to respond to them, and then give two examples. The first, more brief, will be about water management, and the second, a little bit more extended, about seeds and seed libraries. So in terms of the process, I really hope this can be somewhat conversational. I think that can be difficult, but there is the chat box, and you are most welcome to write comments or questions there. I will also ask you some questions, and I would love to get your responses in the chat box. I'll leave about 15 minutes at the end so we can have an actual conversation. Um, and yeah, I think that's it. So let's go ahead. So benefits. What benefits do we know? Do we have empirical evidence about gardens? What benefits can they offer? Well, the first is most obvious. They provide food and maybe some other things like medicine and flowers and a wonderful space. Uh, but obviously they provide food. They can enrich our diets with nutrients that aren't always available, especially in more underserved communities. They can replace a lot of unhealthy foods that tend to be cheap and abundant in our food environment. They can make foods taste good by providing herbs and spices. And they can also help support food justice, just by being in places where they don't have access to good food, and also by providing the crops and the plants that people really are looking for, that have cultural significance and that they enjoy and provide meaning in their lives. So here's an example from a community garden here in Santa Barbara. And I don't know, I'm sure some of you can recognize some of these plants. The tall, bushy one is Huatzontle, and the shorter plants in front are Papaloquelite, very much loved, important herbs in Mexican and other Mesoamerican cuisines. So gardens can also provide healthy physical activity. They can provide it for people of all different abilities, and they're especially valuable for that in environments where people don't have a lot of access to nature and space. Gardens can provide psychological and social benefits just by being in contact with nature, by working with plants, developing mastery of some skills in the garden, by social interactions with other gardeners and with other people around gardening and around the food that is produced. They can provide environmental benefits in terms of shading and water infiltration, habitat for pollinators, um, and just a pleasant place to be. And economic benefits, of course, the value of the food itself, the savings from not having to buy that food, perhaps some income from either sale or trade of the foods that you're producing as well. So gardens are important, and They're valuable for us. But we're gardening, we're accustomed to receiving those benefits under conditions of what I would call familiar variation. So here's a chart for El Centro, California, just showing the observed average maximum August temperature over the last 60 plus years. And this is the kind of variation we're accustomed to. You know, we know it's going to be hot. We're not quite sure how hot in August, but we know the range of variation that is to be expected. And we develop methods, we find varieties, we have strategies for dealing with that. What we're dealing with now is different, and it's more accurately depicted with those same 66 years in Sacramento. And what this is there's still variation, but it's a trend, and it's directional and cumulative, and it's warming, at least in this case in Sacramento. So this is a new kind of experience for all of us, and not just as gardeners, but for everyone on the planet in every sense. So another example that might ring true for a lot of you in terms of a trend associated with anthropogenic climate change is a change in the minimum temperatures that we're experiencing. In other words, our minimum temperatures are getting warmer, and that's a very, very strong signal in climate change right now. And here's an example from Davis, California, for the period from about 1910 to 2018. And what you see on the x-axis are the years, on the y-axis is the day of the year when Davis experienced its last frost. So you can see by the trend line that that day of the year is getting earlier and earlier over time. And what this added up to representing was that in the 1960s, a very safe date for planting and to not experience any problems with frost for your seedlings was around May 6th, and now it's April 4th. So the cold periods are getting shorter. Warming is happening in these minimum temperatures as well as maximum. And we can see these kinds of changes not only globally, but they're local as well. And there's a lot of variation locally, which is a really interesting and important thing to notice. So the top map shows temperature change, comparing the average from 1901 to 1960 with the average from 1990 to 2012. And you can see that the amount of change, the amount of increase in temperature or decrease varies across the country. And there are in fact areas that are decreasing their temperatures, their averages are decreasing a bit. And then we have the same map below for observed precipitation change. And so you're again seeing this very variable expression of anthropogenic climate change. And this is important because it reminds us that sort of global models or very generalized models for how we respond to these changes aren't going to be always relevant, that we have to pay attention to locally specific manifestations of these changes. But it's not just the climate. So there are also these very alarming trends, social trends, and one of the most alarming to me is this trend in disparity of income. You can see this is a global trend. This is just for the United States. You can see that the income of the wealthiest 10% has climbed and continues to climb quite precipitously, while the poorest 50% has barely changed since the mid-60s.